Okay. So do you want to say anything, or I could just jump in and introduce myself?
Yeah, just go.
Okay, cool. So hey, hi there. This is like a little podcast between you and me recording. I don't know if we'll see anybody. It's cool. So anyway, so like quickly, so I'll be talking today about building decentralized applications with Remix and Moralis. And so quick bio about me. I started life as a physicist. I PhD in computational electromagnetics. I spent 2 years after my PhD at MIT Lincoln Lab doing all kinds of crazy stuff like ballistic missile defense and studying radar signatures from space shuttles and that kind of stuff. 2 years into that, I heeded the call to Wall Street. Many kind of math physics people end up going to Wall Street. They call us the quants. So I was a Wall Street quant for a while. And that was quite some time ago. I'm getting quite old. I'm the boomer of DeFi these days. So that was like 2005. I got into finance from physics and been doing like a lot of corporate finance since then, kind of across the spectrum of quant hedge funds, traditional asset management. Did some. I spanned both the buy side and the sell side, investment banking, traditional banking. Most recently, I was in insurance, so kind of from investments to the investment side of an insurance company. And then I kind of stepped out of corporate. I never really was quite happy in corporate finance. I'm kind of a searcher myself and scientist guy. So I kind of broke out and started doing startups in 2014. So I've been doing a bunch of startups since then. Some successes, some failures. I'm kind of recovering from a recent failure. So like now I'm building from the ashes this new startup. I'm pretty excited about it. And so I've been doing this latest startup for about a year now. So I'll be talking about like where this is coming from, and then what I'm up to, and then some of the decisions, like what led me to Remix and some of the other tools I'm using to build this. So, like I said, today, I kind of feel like I'm putting on my professor hat a little bit. I always kind of, I love teaching, so I'm putting on my professor hat a little bit. We'll kind of go back and look at some of the recent history of traditional finance, like what's kind of going on in the world of traditional finance, and then what kind of led to the birth of decentralized finance, and like what's fueling the growth of decentralized finance, and then ultimately, like what kind of dragged me into it, and then some of the stuff I've been working on and how I'm building decentralized finance apps or DeFi apps, including Remix and other tools. So the old guy professor, like let's kind of going back to 2007. I think like if anybody who's listening to this remembers the global financial crisis, there's probably a few points that you might remember. Probably one of the big ones is Lehman Brothers. So I think everybody's probably heard about Lehman Brothers collapse and the global financial crisis. That was kind of like a big deal in traditional finance. But the kind of cracks in the system actually started about a year before that. So the first cracks at that time, similar to pre-COVID days, things were kind of booming. Monetary policy was stable. The Fed had conquered inflation. We had this like great, at the time they call it the great moderation in economics. You don't hear that term. Like I think most young people have never even heard the term great moderation, but we had conquered the credit cycle, so like the Fed was like had superpowers and stuff. But really all they were doing was inflating assets. Kind of like what we're seeing now with inflation. So like back in 2007, every asset class was inflated. It was very hard everything was overpriced, but it wasn't sinking into like what the Fed calls inflation. Like house prices were booming, stocks were booming, even like bonds were booming. So it's like every single asset class was kind of booming. And so it can't go on forever. And one of the first things that happened was kind of the so-called subprime housing market collapsed. People were like buying, some of the like not fancy neighborhoods, but some like modest houses for very inflated prices with no down payment, and really no proof that you can pay for the house. So it's like inevitable that this is going to crash. And you know, the first crash was these Bear Stearns hedge funds that had made a big bet on these securities that were built on subprime mortgages. That happened in 2007. And you know, I was working in a very large asset management firm. It was one of the largest in the world. We had 1.3 trillion, that's T with a trillion US under management for our assets. So it's very large. And we had great access to all the investment things, all the economics research. You know, it was very plugged into what's happening. So I really had a front row seat into what's happening at this time. And yeah, Bear Stearns was a kind of pivotal moment. A year later, you know, Lehman crashed, but Lehman was really just a symptom of a bigger problem. Like it was really the whole system was broken, and Lehman was thrown under the bus. And ironically, like the stories, like the history is always rewritten by the conquerors, right? So it's like the people who survived rewrite the history. But the reality from somebody who kind of lived through that, Lehman Brothers was actually one of the better banks. They had the best risk management. They were known as a gold standard for risk management. So they didn't fail because they were the worst. They actually kind of failed because they were the best. Because if you look at some of the other banks, there was such a mess, including some banks I worked with. There was such a mess that if you let those guys fail, it would have been very disastrous for the rest of the world. But because Lehman was actually quite strong and good, they were able to throw them under the bus without wreaking havoc throughout the rest of the market. So anyway, so like 2007, 2008, there was something else happening around this time that I felt was particularly weird. Was the Federal Reserve here in the US, came into our office. So like I said, we had great access to people. We had some people from the Fed come to our office talking about their portfolio. Like, why does the Fed have a portfolio? The Fed is supposed to be watching the stability of the monetary system, but they actually had a very large portfolio of bonds. And if you think about it, like, that's very bad. Like, why does the Fed have a portfolio of bonds? Because they're the ultimate insider. They're the one that can control the price of bonds. So like, why should they have a portfolio of bonds? And if they lose control, then they're going to lose money too. So like, then the Fed's going to lose money. So I thought that was very weird at the time that the Fed was growing a balance sheet, and that was even before the bailouts. So you know, going into the Lehman Brothers, you know, crash and the subsequent, you know, what they call quantitative easing, and you know, the Fed's money press, all this was like a bailout of the banks basically. And Lehman was thrown under the bus, but they're actually the strongest one. The others were miserable. So pretty much every bank was in bad shape, and they all, in my opinion, they all should have failed. You know, like we had the U.S. president and the U.S. Treasury that they're saying like, oh, the world will collapse if these banks collapse. But you know, that just, in my opinion, that just doesn't give enough credibility to markets. I have a lot more faith in free markets and capital markets. We could have survived Citigroup going under. Like, in fact, you know, kind of one thing, if I go back to the time, like knowing what I knew at the time, what should you do about that? I was convinced all the banks were going to fail. So like, I was thinking about opening up like a local bank, like a credit union or something, because I said, well, when all these global banks fail, and they will for sure fail because they deserve to fail, somebody will need a place to put their paycheck and to do their daily, you know, living. So like they will have no choice but to put their money into a local bank. So that would be a great opportunity for local banks to thrive, and we'll get healthy banks. But I totally underestimated the ability of a government to interfere in the markets with quantitative easing and stuff. And so like, basically they threw trillions of dollars at these big banks, which, you know, since then have seen record profits. So it's like, not one bank failed other than Lehman. You know, they've all seen record profits since then, and that's all based on trillions and trillions of dollars thrown at these banks. And you know, I was quite unhappy with that, but I wasn't the only one. So, you know, this is something that happened in January 3, 2009. It's a bunch of hexadecimal stuff, and what this represents is actually the first block that was minting in the Bitcoin. So 2009, so this is like just after, you know, not quite, yeah, it's like not quite a year after, you know, like less than a year after Lehman Brothers collapse, then you see this appear. And you know, one thing to know,
screen share?
Oh, I'm not even screen sharing.
No.
That's bad. Okay, so but that's okay. I didn't have anything to show yet. So how do you screen share here? Let's see. I'm sorry. Okay.
Yeah, no worries.
Let's see which one. Okay. How's that?
Yeah, no.
Okay, so you didn't miss anything except you had to look at my face. Sorry about that. so anyway, so the first block, so you can see this now. So the first block of the blockchain, the Bitcoin blockchain, and the interesting thing to note here was in this first block was embedded a message. And what is this message? It says the chancellor on brink of second bailout for the banks. So like while I was like stupidly thinking about creating a local bank or credit union, some people much smarter than me were thinking about just building a new financial system. So what Bitcoin is, it's really the foundation to a new kind of indestructible, decentralized financial system. And so I wish I had thought about this. I wish I had joined in at this time, but yeah, I was thinking more traditional. I was thinking about starting something. I knew it was a huge opportunity, but I wasn't thinking about this, and I wasn't plugged into this kind of cyberpunk community. So this happened without me knowing about it, but it happened. So like I was upset with the bank bailouts. I wasn't the only one that was upset about the bank bailouts, and that kind of was the birth of Bitcoin blockchain. It's kind of a protest against traditional finance and building a new financial system. So 2009 was the first Bitcoin block, but about 5 years later, the Bitcoin is quite amazing technology. It allows for store value, transfer of value in a decentralized way, kind of in the spirit of the original internet. Like if you go back to the creation of the internet in the first place, it was kind of created to be this kind of indestructible network that can survive wars, and it can survive, and nobody can shut it down. Kind of in the same spirit, that's what Bitcoin is today. It's this kind of indestructible, blockchain that nobody can shut it down. Like China tried, they failed. U.S. could try, but they will also fail. So it's like trying to shut down the internet. It just can't happen. So that's something cool that was introduced by Bitcoin, but it's quite limited in its functionality. It's really just Bitcoin and transferring Bitcoin, and so it's like you could buy a pizza, but you can't really build an application with it. So that's what came around later, about 5 years after Bitcoin, and something called Ethereum, which is introduced at Bitcoin Miami. I threw up some QR codes here, because these are links to the actual video, because just point your camera at it, and then you can, instead of trying to write down the links, but or you could just Google this, because it's quite easy to find. But I watch this video several times a year, since it was released, because it's quite insightful, and I definitely recommend having a look at this if you're at least been interested in decentralized applications. So what Ethereum is basically a blockchain similar to Bitcoin, but it allows you to write smart contracts, which are applications on the blockchain, which now means it's an application that also has this indestructible nature. Like it can survive wars, it can survive dystopian futures, etc. It can survive interesting. We might talk about this a little later, but it can survive space travel. So there's all kinds of interesting things happening today with kind of blockchain technology used for various reasons. And so anyway, so this was 2014, which for an old guy like me, it's not that long ago, but in terms of crypto and technology, it's forever, right? So that's like a long time ago. It's 8 years, but in the long term, it's really just a flash. So 2014 is quite recent, and so what is it like? In just a very high level, it's basically the word blockchain kind of implies a chain of blocks. So it's a chain of blocks. So it's a state machine in essence. So you have a bunch of states stored in some data structure, and then there's a transition, which includes a bunch of transactions. These can be currency exchanges. These can be running an application. So you have input is the state, and then the output of that application is a new state. So everything gets moved forward to a new state. But the thing about the Ethereum state machine, it's probably the worst possible design. If you're trying to think of like the most inefficient way to do computation, this is probably it, because it's like the opposite of multi-threaded. Multi-threading, you have, thousands of threads doing computations in parallel to make the thing faster. Single-threaded is you run everything through the single thread. But Ethereum is like redundant threaded. Every calculation gets done on every thread. So it's like the computation is multiplied by how many threads you have, and each thread is essentially a node. But there's benefits to that. So it's like, it's not efficient, but it's not designed to be efficient. It's designed to be decentralized. It's designed to be permissionless. It's designed to be trustless, and it's designed to be indestructible. So the cost of having redundant threads, the benefit is indestructible applications that you will run essentially forever, as long as there are people incentivized to keep the chain alive. So, but what's the downside? It's an extremely slow state machine. So, like I said, it's not only is it inefficient, it runs across many threads, it's also super slow. So the computation power is probably less than, say, a pocket calculator. So like, think about what you can do on a pocket calculator, but you can do some things, but you're not going to like run like a big, very computation intensive applications. They have to be kind of simple. Like even like a simple game or like these NFTs can clog the network and slow it down. So like, it doesn't take much to kind of bring at least Ethereum to a crawl, because it's not designed to be fast. But if you want to do finance, like how can you build financial services on something slow? It requires new thinking. You can do it, and people are doing it, but it requires novel approaches, because like finance today, traditional finance kind of assumes that you have fast computers, and you can do lots of calculations per second, and it depends on low latency. This is like a new paradigm where you have to think about like, okay, so no, I don't have fast computers, but can I still do finance? And there's some beautiful innovations. We'll talk about some of them, but probably next I'll just go to like one example is the traditional exchange, like traditional finance. Like if you ever like had to do a currency exchange, like change a euro for a US dollar or whatever, like you can go to an exchange and you can find a price. So what's the purpose of an exchange? Exchange essentially is a price maker. So it says like, okay, if I have some euro, I want to buy some US dollar for a trip to the Bay Area, like what's the exchange rate? So like the exchange rate is determined by supply and demand. There's supply, people have it, and there's demand, people want it, and there's an equilibrium between those two forces. And that equilibrium is the price of the exchange price, or it could be stocks. The same concept is for stock trading. Like what's the price of a stock? It depends on the supply and demand or the orders. How many people want to buy the stock versus how many people want to sell the stock. So this, I don't know if you can you see my mouse on the screen share? Okay, so
Yeah.
So that's good. So this is called a depth chart. So what we're looking at here is the x-axis is the prices of say this is stock. It doesn't matter what it is. So this is something that's traded on an exchange, and this is the price. And this point here is the price, and the axis is different prices. It's not the current price. The current price is this point where it meets. So like you can buy this stock or whatever it is at this price, at this kind of equilibrium price right there. But if you want to buy, like let's say you want to buy 200 shares of this thing, whatever it is, what this axis is, this is like how many shares. So like I could buy, this looks like 5 or something. So there's like 5. I can buy these 5, but if I do, the price is going to move up here. Then this looks like another, okay, 6, 7, 8, okay, 10. I'm going to come up here. So like, if you add all these up, like maybe around here, like if you sum all these, this is cumulative. So I actually can come up all the way here. So that's right. So these are cumulative. So if I want to buy 200, I'm going to gobble up all these orders until up to here. So the price would move to here because of supply and demand. Similarly, if I want to sell 200 stocks, then I would gobble up all these buy orders, and then the price would move down as I sell my shares to here. So this is like, it's very fun. I looked for a movie, I couldn't find it, but it's very fun to see this in action. So like see this in real or live, because the thing will just move around, and as people buy and sell stocks, this price will move around, and this shape will move around. It's quite neat to look at. But this is called a central limit order book. And how this works is all these are orders. So like, I don't know if you trade stocks at all or trade, but there's different kinds of orders. One is a market order. A market order is something where you say, I'm just going to buy it at the current price, whatever it is. So that will be gobbling up these guys here. But you can say, I want to sell my stock if it comes up to this price. And so these are called limit orders. So you have market orders occur right at the point where the market price is. Then you have limit orders that say, if the price moves up to here, then I'll sell it. But I don't want to sell it if it's below this. So that's why you get this kind of shape, because some people are willing to sell at this price, but they're not willing to sell at this price. So as you place an order, you kind of move up this, which means like as you gobble up these orders, they go away. So this point on the x-axis moves, and that's the price. But how does this work? So this is a centralized order. In fact, centralization is in the name. It's called the central limit order book. And why that's centralized is some party has to collect all these orders. So like you'll place an order, I'll place an order, you get tens of thousands or millions of orders, and people say, I want to buy, I want to sell. Some central party has to collect all these orders and create this kind of shape, like effectively. And then the price you pay kind of is determined by the dynamics of this order book. So like that requires, in the early days of Ethereum and decentralized applications, people tried to do this on Ethereum. But imagine trying to do this on a pocket calculator. It's going to be very hard. It's like, okay, I'm trying to manage I'm trying to match orders, a buy order and a sell order, and that requires a little work, and like I have to do that tens of thousands or millions of times, and it's just it's quite computationally intensive. For traditional finance and centralized person, they could probably do this on a modern smartphone. The processor in a smartphone can probably do this, but it's not that difficult. But it does require some computation power, and like the early days of Ethereum just did not have this ability. But people tried it, but it just was not a very poor user experience, because it's like super slow and it crashed and clogged the network and stuff like that. So that's what people tried in the early days. But then move forward a few years. So 3 years after the Ethereum was announced, then we get this announcement from Hayden Adams about this new thing called Uniswap. So Uniswap is a new kind of exchange. It's called a decentralized exchange, which is more specifically called automated market maker. So what does that mean? Like the previous slide, the whole purpose of this guy is to tell you what's the price of something. It's a price maker. It's a black box that will spit out, put in a bunch of orders, and it'll spit out a price. And so like, but that's not working on a decentralized application. But what Uniswap did, they weren't the first to introduce the concept of automated market maker, but they were the first to do it in a way that was scalable, that can actually work and get traction. So it was efficient enough. So like you have to think, when doing decentralized applications, you have to think about efficiency and like think about like, okay, this is going to run on a pocket calculator. So like, what's the simplest way to do it? And so what they did was, like I said, they weren't the first one, so they're not the creator, but like the concept is quite beautiful. So I'll talk about the concept a little bit. And that's a peer-to-pool. so like you have a pool of assets. So like instead of like in this one, you don't have a pool of assets, you have a pool of orders. You have a pool of orders where people want to buy something and people want to sell something. But here, you don't have a pool of orders. What you have is a pool of assets. So now if somebody wants to trade US dollar for euro or vice versa, the first thing you do is you get people that already have US dollar. Say, okay, I have some US dollar. It's my savings or whatever. I'm not doing anything with it. I'm willing to put that into a pool to let other people use it, as long as I earn interest on it. So like if I put my US dollars in a pool, I want to earn some interest on it, and I'm going to receive what's called pool tokens in exchange. So like so this pool token I can trade back in a later date. So like if I put in $100, I would get like certain number of pool tokens, and then the idea is like in the future I should be able to put those pool tokens back in and get more than $100 because I should have got the $100 plus some interest back. So it's a little different concept. You start with pools, but then where does that interest come from? The interest comes from, now you have people on the other side. So the right side is people that have US dollar and people that have euro, and they're willing to kind of lock that up for other people to use it in exchange for interest. And then on the left side, you have people that actually want to trade, like they're looking for arbitrage opportunities, or maybe they're traveling and they need to exchange something, and so they want to trade one currency for another, and they'll pay a transaction fee. And so that transaction fee, instead of going to your bank in this kind of decentralized exchange, that transaction fee goes to the pool token holders. So every time somebody trades here, the value of the pool token goes up. So there's this kind of symbiotic relationship between people. On the right side, they're called liquidity providers. They're people that own an asset who are willing to stake that asset into a pool for other people to use it. And then on the other side, the left side, you have people who need it for some reason, and they're willing to pay a fee to use it. And so this creates like a very interesting symbiotic relationship. And the success of this requires having both sides active. So you can't have traders will not be able to trade unless you have liquidity providers providing liquidity, and liquidity providers won't provide liquidity unless they're earning interest from traders. So it's kind of like this machine that, like, it might be a little difficult to get started, but once it's going, there's this nice relationship going there. And then, but like, if you look at that, so on the right side, what's happening is you're putting in some US dollar and getting pool tokens out. On the left side, you're putting in, say, euro, and you're getting US dollars out. But then the question is, like, how many? Like, how many US dollars am I going to get out for every euro you put in? Or how many pool tokens am I going to get out for every dollar I put into the pool? And that depends on having a price. And the whole point of decentralized applications is they should not refer to some central authority. You don't want to like look up on Bloomberg, like, what's the price of a euro or a US dollar or vice versa. It should be kind of contained in the application itself. And that is kind of the magic of what automated market makers do. Through kind of financial engineering, they have kind of a model for supply and demand based on how much liquidity is in a pool. So instead of like how many orders are in the pool and trying to find an equilibrium between orders, what this does, it looks at how much liquidity is in the pool, and prices are determined by how much US dollar is in the pool versus how much euro is in the pool. And if that exchange rate is wrong, then that creates an opportunity for somebody to make money. And as they take advantage of that opportunity, the price becomes correct again. So like there's this kind of natural force that will force the price to be correct. So the exchange rate will be correct, because if it's not correct, somebody will take advantage of that. And when they take advantage of that, it will become correct. So it's like, that's kind of like how markets work. People are always looking for inefficiencies. And if there is some inefficiency, somebody will take advantage of it. And that as soon as that efficiency goes away, then the price is correct. So that's called arbitrage pricing. And so the science of the automated market makers is quite neat. Like as a physicist myself and a financial engineer myself, it's quite neat. And I think it's quite profound even that, I think the impact of this kind of concept hasn't even been felt yet. So, right, it was kind of an innovation that came out of DeFi. I actually think that the implications are much bigger than DeFi. And I think this kind of model can actually kind of leak back to even traditional finance. So this is a very neat concept. It was just a total change on the way price discovery works. And so, there are some kind of financial engineering models out there. Like I said, Uniswap is one such model. So like when I started looking at this, this is a paper that I published back in November last year. And I was looking at it from, a cool financial mathematics problem. Like can you build a better model? Can you build a better automated market maker? And there are some assumptions, like the beautiful thing about Uniswap is quite simple, but it's unreasonably effective. So it's super effective and super simple. So how can it be, so like, I don't like just postulating a formula and say like, oh, here's something that works. I want to kind of derive it from first principles. So I kind of set out to derive some of these automated market maker mathematics from first principles. Ended up with this paper in November. And it turns out that the Uniswap, I wasn't trying to derive Uniswap. I was just looking at like clean slate, let's derive what an automated market maker should look like. And it turns out that Uniswap is actually a special case of the general framework. So like, I kind of feel like this paper is, I hope it's recognized as being a good contribution at some point, but I kind of feel like this is kind of the equivalent of the Black-Scholes model. So this is like, in a way, sometimes I refer to this as like the Black-Scholes of automated market makers. It's the financial principles that describe why do automated market makers work. So like, I won't get into the details of this, but like if anybody's interested in nerding out on some of the mathematics, please feel free to reach out to me. I'll give my contact info at the end. And, I'm quite active on the Discord server, so be happy to discuss some of this with anybody on the Discord server. But this is just like something that I developed for automated market makers, quite exciting. So like, this is like the basis of my current startup. I don't want to talk about my startup too much because this is more like the technology and stuff, but this is what I've been working on, and kind of what led me down this path is like this beautiful concept of a pool is actually quite profound, and so it's exciting. So like, I'm building a new startup to kind of build this out. It's a new kind of foundation for decentralized capital markets. So anyway, so that's kind of the background. So like, that's like, where does DeFi come from? It's interesting that DeFi and decentralized Bitcoin, Ethereum is almost like there's a big element of protest. There's a big element of philosophy and politics. People just want freedom from governments. They want, so like, there's something powerful going on here that it's quite an exciting thing. And it's not just snake oil salesmen. There's definitely a lot of scams, but there is some really smart people working in this space and doing some really good stuff. So anyway, so like, I've got something that I need to build. So how do you build it? And that's kind of like, I think why you guys invited me in the first place was like, I built it with using Remix. So let's see, like, so here's kind of like a splash of some of the technology. I can talk about this a little bit, like where everything fits in. And one thing that's kind of funny, because if you look at this, like, okay, I published this in November. Now, if you look at the Remix Run GitHub repo, I should pull that up, but and then look at like contributors, and then you look at, okay, who started contributing massively around October, November last year? You'll see this guy named Kent C. Dodds, right? So Kent C. Dodds is like this kind of high-profile developer, and now he's part of the Remix team. And like right around the time I was starting to build a greenfield, decentralized application, this very excited guy was just everywhere talking about Remix. So it's like, how can you not try Remix? Because like he made very compelling stories for why Remix is good. It's quite a fresh wave. Yeah. First of all, I should have said from the beginning that I'm actually not a web developer. I build prototypes. So like, I'm a prototype builder. So whatever I built so far, you can think of it as more like a prototype. So like, my prototype is using Remix. But I'm not a pro by any means, but I'm fairly technical. So like, when I heard Kent talking about Remix, and this whole thing is having server side code and client side code in the same file, it's a little mind-boggling to me. It's like, how is this part of my code to server, and how is this part of my code to client? And and having things like GraphQL like in the file but running on the server, and like this stuff is so it's quite neat how you get very lean code in the client, built from server side. I'm new to server side. This is the first time for me doing any kind of server side rendering stuff. Like I said, anything I do is prototype up to this point. So it's been a learning experience for me with Remix. And then it's also the first time for me to build a decentralized application. So like there's so many firsts for me here. So Remix is new, but also building for blockchain is new. So how do you build in blockchain? Like one of the first things I came across, and this is like in the subject of the meetup too, is this Moralis. So if you're interested in building decentralized applications, I definitely recommend checking out Moralis. So what Moralis is like it's not decentralized itself, but it's kind of like the bridge between like Web 2 or like the Web 2, like traditional web development, and the blockchain. So like if you're starting a new decentralized application, the blockchain, you can set up a node and you can run blocks and you can validate blocks yourself, but that's quite a technical effort, so you have, it's not something you'll do on a weekend, So like if you want to set up a node, if you want to set up like databases accessing the blockchain, the blockchain itself is not very user friendly in terms of its data structure and extracting information from the blockchain. So typically you could easily spend a year setting up just the infrastructure to talk to the blockchain and extract what you need to build an application, and then have your front end talking to that kind of middle layer that kind of processes what's on the blockchain. But that's what Moralis is essentially. So they do that work for you. So like they're monitoring the blockchain, they're running nodes, they update their information in real time. So now you can have your front end talking to Moralis, and then the Moralis is doing the interface with the blockchain for you. So you're not really talking directly to the blockchain, you're talking to the blockchain through Moralis, which introduces an element of centralization, but nothing's fully decentralized yet. The key part, the kind of financial transactions and the smart contracts, those are purely decentralized, running on the blockchain. But things like the Moralis, your databases, your GraphQL, you don't want that. You don't even want your data, your user data. You never want to put user data on a blockchain. So it's still okay to have an element of centralization. Things like you see some startups putting health records on the blockchain. Oh no, please, because it's all transparent. It's all there. It's encrypted, but 20 years from now, it'll be cracked and etc. So you don't want to put sensitive information on blockchain, but you can put that in your own databases. So there's Moralis is kind of like a bridge between the purely decentralized blockchain and your front end application. So, and then there's another piece. So Moralis. So you have your React is your front end user interface, and then and the server piece that's feeding that. But then that's talking to Moralis. But then like to get this link between Moralis and your blockchain, you need something called a wallet. So that MetaMask is called a wallet. So if you want to do kind of transactions interacting with the blockchain, you need a wallet. And MetaMask, the whole thing about crypto is it's cryptography. So crypto and cryptography, it means cryptography. So this handles the cryptographic elements of the blockchain for you. This will do your signing, your transactions, cryptographic signing transactions, etc. But the thing is, and this is what creates a challenge when building a Remix app that I kind of struggled a bit with. What's a MetaMask is a browser extension. So this will install as an extension to your browser, and so like by definition, an extension to your browser is client side. So like you can't put that in the server. So I thought Kent made this Remix sound cool. So like I kind of whipped up the template app, and Moralis is kind of assuming everything's in the client. So like they have very nice React hooks. So like you can communicate with the blockchain through MetaMask using React hooks here. So I kind of got an app running, and then I got my Moralis running. And by the time I got an MVP working, I realized like, wait a second, all my business logic is happening in the client. And the cool thing about Remix is it's good for the servers. So like I was kind of like I was misusing Remix initially. And I said, well, that's bad. That's a bad smell, to have a Remix app with everything operating in the client. So then I immediately try to move everything to the server. So then I'm trying to move all. I said, okay, well, I'll get my user information up here. I'll have my server talk to the blockchain. But if any of your listeners have ideas, I couldn't figure out how to do that. That's beyond my my pay grade. That's beyond my skill to kind of figure out, because essentially you need this MetaMask, or you need something to handle the cryptographic elements. So like what I eventually ended up having to do is like kind of split functionality. So there is some stuff, like if you're just querying general information about the blockchain, you don't need the MetaMask. The MetaMask is if you need to like authentication. So this is like authenticating yourself against the blockchain. So then you can get information about particular users or their balances on the blockchain, or you can sign signatures, etc. So still, I think I ended up with probably a suboptimal split, like where you draw the line between client and server. But so I do as much as I could do without thinking too hard about the server interacting with the blockchain, and then for the real user stuff where you have to like perform a transaction, that happens in the client. So actually now I have kind of a split between some business logic happens in the client and some business logic happens in the server. And like I said, I build prototypes. I'm not a pro, so like I was looking for some good component libraries. So the Discord for Remix is super helpful. So like some people there kind of kindly referred me to this Mantine. So this is like a free open source project for really nice looking UI components, and it works nicely with Remix. So they have kind of support for Remix. So Mantine is like a UI component library that I'm using. It handles the styling, etc. So it's funny. Like I think when we first set up this meetup, it's like, and what I keep repeating to myself is, what a time to be alive. It's like, imagine if you're just starting your career in web development today. It's like so amazing that there's like tools like Remix and Moralis and Mantine, and it's like, and Fly. So like you want to deploy. I mean, even I could do it. Like it's like, if I could do it, anybody, I swear, if I can do it, anybody can do it. So deploying is quite easy these days. Styling is quite easy these days. Remix. So everything is like, it's just amazing to think about what younger generation is going to do with these tools. Like even my 10-year-old kid is like playing around with JavaScript and stuff. So it's like people are coming out of like even in crypto, it's funny. Like a lot of the major contributors are still in high school. So like it's just mind-boggling what the next generation is going to do, especially for an old guy like me. But anyway, so this like front end, I think some of you are probably familiar with Mantine and Fly, because these are both kind of in the Remix storyline. So like Remix, one of the major deployments is Fly. So like deploying to Fly is quite easy. Mantine is also kind of hooked in with Remix. The guys there are familiar with it in the Discord. And then like getting back to kind of this middle piece, smart contracts on Ethereum are written in a language called Solidity. So Solidity is a new language. If you're familiar with JavaScript, it should be pretty easy to learn Solidity. It's kind of inspired by JavaScript a little bit. So learning the syntax is not very difficult, but it's quite a new paradigm. So like for me to learn to write Solidity code, it's not about syntax, because syntax is easy. You learn the syntax. But what's a little weird about writing decentralized applications is like you can't run your code unless you have resources. Like the difference about Ethereum, like I said, it's like a pocket calculator. The resources are quite constrained. So the way the network works is like every operation that happens on that chain requires some resource, and that resource is called gas. So every line of your code that runs, it requires gas, which is kind of a new thing to think about. Like I never thought about until I started writing Solidity. This code requires gas. So like you have to write it like efficiently, and every plus, every plus or every like assignment, will require some gas. So it's a little different writing smart contracts in Solidity. And found, so like I said, what a time to be alive. Around the time like Kent was like promoting Remix, this new tool called Foundry came out. So Foundry is a tool for building and testing smart contracts in Solidity. The tool chain itself is written in Rust. So like people familiar with Rust know that it's like a low level, to the metal kind of programming language. Is quite fast. So this kind of opened up all kinds of new possibilities. And the cool thing that was new when this came out was that, and it sounds silly, like I think like for most people, if you're writing web applications, you're probably using TypeScript. So you write your tests in TypeScript, right? So if your application is TypeScript, you write your tests in TypeScript. But in smart contracts, typically you write your smart contract in Solidity, but your tests are written in TypeScript. So your tests are JavaScript because you're interacting with the blockchain. So what this introduced was, it sounds quite obvious to do, but this is the first time it's been done to my knowledge, is you can actually write your test in Solidity. So there's no context switching. So you write your application using Solidity, and you test your application in Solidity, and it's very fast because it's written in Rust. And so this created so this came out around the same time as I started building this greenfield application. Kind of the workhorse up to that point before Foundry came around is this thing called the hard hat. So hard hat is what I was talking about. It's a TypeScript library. You can write your tests and you can deploy your smart contracts all using JavaScript, TypeScript. So this is still quite popular workhorse, but my application is actually kind of a hybrid. So I kind of have build and test using Foundry, but deploy using hard hat. So this, I use hard hat to actually send the smart contracts to Ethereum. So these are all the tools that I used, and there's still quite a lot. So what I have right now, it's really just some very minimal interactions with the blockchain. Where I want to go, and that's where I think Remix will really start to shine, because right now, it's questionable whether I need Remix, because just like a simple React app probably could have been fine. But where I kind of expect it to start shining more is once I start doing more analytics dashboards, like doing more data heavy stuff, where I'm actually extracting information from the blockchain and putting it into my own database and querying that and doing analytics on that. So I'm not there yet, but I still am happy with my decision to go with Remix, even though it probably made my life a little more difficult in the early days, because everything was React hooks anyway for the business logic. But anyway, so that's where I am now. So I think, from here, the next thing I'll just kind of jump into the app itself and show you a bit how it works. So before I do that, Nicholas, if you have any questions or anything.
Yeah, no, go for it.
Okay. So that's where I am, like where it came from. I'm kind of an old TradFi guy. I've been doing startups for 8 years, and you cannot do a startup the last 8 years without being at least adjacent to crypto and DeFi. So it's always kind of there in the back of my mind. But like when I kind of came up with this idea, it was like very exciting, because it brings everything I know about capital markets in my experience, and even physics. The derivation of this financial engineering actually, builds on some stuff I was doing in physics and stuff like this. So it's pretty exciting time to be building decentralized applications. So maybe from here, let me see if I can find my close this down. And so here it is. So this is actually deployed on Fly. Can you see this, Nicholas?
No.
I lost it. Okay, let me see if I can. Let's see. Oh.
Yeah.
There you go.
Oh, so
this is just so this is kind of like, I call it testnet alpha. It's maybe like a little better than an MVP, so it's like, but it's basically an MVP, but maybe slightly better. I think it looks okay. So like, it's not the worst thing I've ever seen. But so anyway, this is styled with Mantine. It's built with Remix, and then just to point out some things. So like what I mentioned, MetaMask, that's this guy right here. So MetaMask is an extension. So if I open up this guy, okay, you can see that. So oh, I didn't. Let me see if I can. Okay. This is some money, but it's fake money because I'm on a test net. So I connected my wallet to what's called the Ropsten testnet. So this is just, as it sounds, it's a test version of the blockchain where you can throw smart contracts and test them out before you put it on the mainnet. And and every single transaction that you do, like I said, costs money. So like you have to have Ethereum or ETH, the token of Ethereum to run programs and stuff. So for me to actually deploy this to the mainnet, it will cost me some money to do that. So sending it to the testnet is a good way, and then you can get some ETH tokens from some faucets. So they have some faucets that you have to request, some ETH, and then you can get some ETH. So once you have some ETH, you can start doing some interaction with the blockchain. But yeah, so this is a MetaMask extension that goes into your browser, which kind of makes it a bit of a challenge for writing web applications, because like I said, the server cannot communicate with a web extension. so you need that interaction to happen to the client, which makes the design of a Remix app a little challenging. But anyway, so here, this is not yet connected, and one reason, because I think you should be shy about connecting a wallet to an application you don't know. So like if you have money in your if you're already like a pro, or maybe even a noob or something, and you've kind of invested in crypto tokens, you probably don't want to connect your wallet to random applications and stuff. So like if you want to play with this, I would suggest creating a new account with no money in there, and then just connect. And then if you do that, and then you connect a wallet, but you don't even have to do that, because my first version of this, you had to connect a wallet before you can do anything. It's like you wouldn't even see this until you connect the wallet, but that's not very good UX. So I kind of changed it so you can still play around with it without connecting a wallet. So if you come here now even without a wallet installed, you can still hit the swap thing. So what this whole thing is, remember this slide I showed you about the pools. So like you have different pools with different tokens in it, and so this is like, my model is really just one pool with all the tokens in the same pool. So it's a little different design than what's out there today. It's very different than Uniswap. I have these 5 tokens kind of in there. It doesn't matter too much, I guess, like what this is really doing, but there is some kind of innovative stuff here. Like here, like a typical like Uniswap or typical exchange, you just say, okay, I want to change one token for another one, and then that'll give. These prices are not correct, by the way. It's just testing out. So then you can say, okay, what if I change this, or kind of increase. So it's interesting that if you go big enough, the number stops changing, and that's because of this. What I mentioned, the mathematics of supply and demand. It doesn't matter how much you put in. At some point, you cannot take everything out of a pool. So like, it doesn't matter how much US dollar you put in, you can never take out all the euro because the price just increases to infinity at some point. And so that's kind of like what you're seeing there. So anyway, so this is, you know, this is what like a typical like Uniswap, or what you might see if you're familiar with crypto decentralized exchanges. But what's new is that this is what I call multi-asset swap. So you can actually throw in a bunch of tokens here. So this is like saying, I want to put these 3 tokens into the pool, and then I want to take this 1 token out. So this will tell you like how many tokens out you get if you put these many in. It's all, you know, supply demand. So like if I change this. So the mathematics of how this works is a little sophisticated. And so like say 3 tokens in, 1 out, or I can say 3 tokens in, 2 tokens out, or, you know, you can have all kinds of 2 in, and, you know, 4 out. So this is kind of new. And if you do this kind of thing with, you know, what's new here is like this allocation. So that there's no exchange today that has this kind of thing where it's like, okay, I'm going to say I want 40% of that token and 60% and 40%. And so now you say like, if I put these 2 in, I want these out in this proportion, and then you can swap. So then like if you actually want to do some transactions, then you connect your wallet. What's happening here? It's not working. Oh, because this is something interesting. Okay, so what's I think one thing that's bad about my demo is like it's a demo, so it's like there's no real-time interactions. So like I was kind of like logging in and logging out, so it's not aware of that because it takes some time before the blockchain will know these things. So like, there you go. So this is basically what I'm doing. I did the connect. I had to refresh so that it knows the current state. So like, so that's a bad design on my part. But so now after I refresh things, it knows what's going on. And so this is basically authenticating myself with the Moralis database. So like now once I sign in, it'll know who I am. It can pull down my balances for all my tokens. So now I get this new column here that wasn't there before. So like this is just general information about the pool. But if you connect, now it queries the Moralis knows about the blockchain, and so I query Moralis, and now I know the balances for all these tokens that I have. And then if anybody who's watching wants to try this out, and you go to this website, you're not going to have any balance because it's a fresh account, and these are all test tokens. So like, just note this thing down here. Like there is a such token called wrapped Ethereum or wrapped Ether, and there's a token called USD coin, but these are just mock versions of these for a test. So don't be confused that these are actual tokens, and it's just a test net. So I just wanted to look as much as like the actual thing as possible. So if you hit this mint token, then it'll go through. I can try and see what happens. So anytime you interact with the blockchain, it needs your signature. So what's going to do now? It's minting like a Fed would print tokens to me. So like if you come here and you do that, it knows who you are. If you say mint tokens, it's going to mint tokens to you, and these are all test tokens. I confirm that there's 5 tokens, so I have to confirm it for each one. Should be it. No, there's not that many tokens. Okay. So it had to do that for each token. So now it's in the process of minting. We can actually look at the status. So here, so these are so 3 of them are completed already. So this is like looking at the blockchain. So 3 of them, the 4th one just finished. Now they're all done. So now it's minted these 5 tokens to me, and then there's no real time yet. So like eventually I'd like to hook up WebSockets or something, but it doesn't know. So like if I refresh, hopefully you can see some new. Oops. So okay. So it just minted. So these were like 1,000 to that. So it just minted some tokens to me. And so like if you come here fresh and you say mint tokens, you can go to that. You have to refresh at the moment because there's no feedback, and it takes like 10 seconds per block for a transaction to complete. So your web page will surely reload before it knows that the transaction is complete. So one good thing about Moralis is it does have these kind of subscription models. So I can subscribe, and then I'll know if there's a change, and then I can update my UI accordingly. So that's pretty much it. What I have in terms of the presentation and the thing. I'll just pop this up here. Let me go back to the presentation again. Let's see. Oh no. I went too fast. So I don't know, Nicholas, if you have any questions or anything.
No, not that I can come up with. We talked about all of this when I came down to you there. So or most of it, yeah. Well, thank you very much.
So if anybody over there watches this, and if you're interested, then feel free to contact me. If you want to, Discord is quite popular for some of these crypto projects and stuff. So I've got a fairly, it's a high quality, not so many people, but it's a high quality discussions happen on the Discord server. Use a QR code. But if you email me and you don't want to fiddle with the QR code, I can send you a link directly. And then I'm also on Twitter at Eric Forgy. So I'm on Twitter. I should have put that here too. But yeah, that's it. Hope you found it interesting.
Yeah.